Great. Okay, so welcome to another episode of the Manchester SEO podcast. Today we have Claire Owen with us. Claire has a business called HR Made Easy and a multitude of other things, including an app, which we'll talk about as well. And a wealth of experience as head of HR for big brands like Starbucks and Gap. Welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to get you on for a while, so I find if you moan it or ask enough to people, eventually it just get in. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So HR Made Easy. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so as you said, I've been in HR a really long time.
Yeah.
Fell into it, really, if I'm honest. I actually wanted to be a fashion buyer.
Right.
I don't know what happened, really, other than I did business studies at college, and then I went on to a BHS graduate training scheme.
Yeah.
And you had to choose to either go into HR, shop floor, or in the kind of back offices.
Right.
And I chose HR, and that was basically it. I was in.
That was you done.
I was in. I was in. So I started in BHS when that was a thing. It's not even a thing now. Yeah. And I mean, it just says how much HR has evolved. I was called a staff manager.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just shows, it was all about locker keys and uniforms, not really how HR, has evolved over the years now.
Timestamps.
Yeah, exactly that. So I started off there, and then basically been in retail kind of all my life, really, from a HR point of view. So I was at Forte Hotels, which was amazing. Looked after 5 massive hotels in London. Okay. So what you don't learn there from a HR point of view is really not worth knowing. Yeah. So obviously work permits, goodness, and live-in staff. Yeah, it's a minefield. So did that, and then kind of went into more, as you mentioned, Starbucks. So when Starbucks came to the UK, I supported the whole HR team there and did HR there and loved it. Starbucks was such a fantastic business. Really exciting at the time as well, because it was new to the UK and it was all the...
Huge in America at the time, wasn't it?
Huge in America, and we spent a lot of time in America. So I spent a lot of time in Seattle, kind of being in they just want you to be part of the brand. And, the funny thing about when you join Starbucks is you have to do all of the roles first. So I had to be a barista. You have to learn about coffee. You can't just walk in and be the HR person. You have to. So I was the barista at Victoria Station. It's quite possibly the worst experience of my life.
That was business.
Horrendous. The queues for miles.
Wow.
And then you have to go and be a supervisor, a manager. So you have to go through all the roles so that you really understand the grassroots of how the business is run, so that therefore you as a HR person can really support properly because you understand the business.
They do brands very well. That they do to understand your brand very well.
Yeah, so that was amazing. And then I went to work for B&Q. So I went to work for B&Q. People were like, why are you going from Starbucks to B&Q?
Yes.
And it was really because HR got such a great reputation at B&Q. Obviously, you've got all the older workers. You've got people of 90 working there, watering plants. And, you've got it's really great. Some of the initiatives they put in.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to go and join them. So I did all the kind of generalist HR jobs. I did the HR manager. I did the divisional HR manager role. I mean, and a division in B&Q is 10,000 staff, so it's huge. It's not, it's not the thing I did. So I did that, but then they really wanted me to come into head office and look after the engagement of the business. Right. So I worked really closely with Ian Cheshire, the CEO, really on explaining what the vision of B&Q was, what the values are, and making sure that was cascaded down to the shop floor. So I was head of employee engagement and internal communication.
Okay.
So that was fascinating role, really getting people to understand, how their jobs impact into the vision of the business. So, what do I need to do to ensure that the business achieves?
Yeah.
Which was great. And then the most recent, but not at all recent, because I've had my own HR consultancy for 16 years, I was HR director for Gap.
Okay.
So something about American brand to me, I don't know what, but so I looked after the UK retail stores for the Gap.
Okay.
And then kind of made the decision that I kind of felt I'd done corporate, really. I've been in it for so long.
Yeah.
And I thought, look, I've gained all this experience. Why don't I go and do it for myself? So I set up HR Made Easy to do exactly that. Try to make HR easy. Because I think, sometimes we overcomplicate it. And it's a minefield for people if you don't know HR. So I've always been really practical, really tried to make things easy. So that's why I set up HR Made Easy. And I support small to medium-sized businesses with their HR. So, if they're just starting out, they need the foundations, then I can do kind of handbooks and contracts. That's kind of my bread and butter piece. But also because I've held those roles, HR director roles, then I can go kind of up the way as well and provide real strategic HR support, which is where I think HR can really add value. I think that's the big thing about HR. We're all seen as, we're the people that do the disciplinaries and the redundancies, and we're the butt of all jokes around sales prevention and, all of that. And if you see any, things on television, it's always a HR person who's getting the bad rep.
Sure.
So, that's kind of, that's what I've done.
Yeah. Because as you grow as a business, you get staff and you grow internally and infrastructure wise, but you might still not have the resources to then have someone come in and control the HR side of things for you.
Yeah.
So you would come to someone like you to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, if certainly for, startups or for, really entrepreneurial businesses, what they're great, the CEOs of these businesses and founders, they're brilliant at, thinking about where their business is going and the great ideas, but they don't necessarily know the HR element. And, the managing of the people is, can't be underestimated, really. It's I remember somebody saying to me, don't ever underestimate how hard it is and how much time it takes to manage a team. And it really does.
Yeah.
I think once you get to that management level, people really, they end up doing less of their actual job and end up managing people.
Sure.
It's a huge element of the role.
There's so many skills involved with managing people.
Yeah.
That you don't get it right.
No, exactly, which is why then we step in.
Yeah.
But, I fundamentally believe, and whilst I was working at B&Q, did a lot of work around employee engagement. And as I said, the internal communication, so really engaging people in the vision and the values so that they understand what they're doing. But, from an engagement point of view, it's really about, recruiting the right people at the beginning. So it's the whole employee profit chain. So if you recruit the right people and you recruit them to the behaviors of your business.
Yeah.
So, what behaviors do you want to see? What do you want to see? What do you want to feel? What do you want it to look like in your business? So you really need to recruit the people that you want to be with every day. Yeah. It's so important. You can teach people skills. Obviously if it's certain roles, they need to have an element of the skills, of course, but if you recruit to the behaviors and then you really look after your people, so you engage them, you build trust with them, you develop them, and you really just nurture that employee, then what they'll want to do is they'll want to repay you by looking after your customers. It just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Yeah. They'll want to sing from the rooftops about what a great employer you are and and what great products you offer, or, what your vision is, and they'll translate that to your customers. And then that's proven by Gallup. Gallup have done so many surveys on this that, it does lead to higher profit.
Yeah.
So if you just do that and you do it really well, then your business will thrive.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt about it.
We had Pete Ackley on a few weeks ago, and he's in senior leadership roles in sport for governing bodies, and he talks a lot about culture.
Yeah.
And how developing culture then creates good habits.
Yeah.
And good habits create good results.
Yeah.
But it all starts from that, building a team, looking after them, supporting them, developing.
Yeah, and being more human. So it is really about not in a fluffy HR way, as everybody says, but it's about caring about your people. It's about looking out for them. Are they okay? Because if they're okay and they're feeling good about themselves and they're feeling good about what they're achieving in their work, they're going to do a great job for you.
Sure.
And therefore you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
So, it just makes perfect sense.
It's a bit earlier than I was planning, but that sounds like a perfect kind of way to go into the Emoti, the app that you developed.
Yeah.
Talk us through what that is and how that helps.
Yeah. So, having gained all this experience in HR, you can't help but think that there's a number of processes that were clunky. Throughout my whole HR career, there's things that HR kind of wheel out every year, like the annual appraisal, which you'll hear more about in a second. But we just keep rolling out these things because they're HR initiatives, and it's what we do, and it's what we've always done. And I've really felt that there were things that needed to change. So I was reading an article, which I've told you about before, James, by David Brailsford. So he was the head of Team Sky at the time. And the article was all about an app that he'd created. And it was an emotion-based app. And he insisted that everybody in Team Sky, so be it the back office people, the physio, anybody that was part of that team, had to answer a number of questions based on their emotion and how people were feeling on that day. And unless people were feeling the very highest, happiest, smashing it emoji, then that's where he brought in his marginal gains.
Sure.
So he felt that, if somebody wasn't right up there was a great opportunity for him to even be 1% better. And when I read that, I thought, you know what, that would be brilliant in business. Because, how do we really know how people are feeling?
Yeah.
Do people reach out? Well, we know that people don't always reach out. And especially now with kind of remote working, how do you know that the people working at home or your team's working at home, how do you know that they're okay?
Yeah.
Lots of people have amazing offices that they can work in at home. But, other people, might be working from home in their bedroom, sitting on the bed that they sleep in and, not feeling great about working at home.
Laptop on an ironing board.
Laptop on a coffee table down there, or however their setup is. And it's about, how do they reach out? So I created Emoti on the back of that, really. And that was to, one, to help employees and managers connect and really start having those really conscious, collaborative and, conversations and more regular conversations.
Yeah.
So not having a yearly conversation with your manager.
Yeah.
How are we expected to achieve our objectives if we only talk to our teams about them once a year? We set these objectives at the beginning of the year. We then put those objectives in the drawer. and then the next time we look at them is next year,
Yeah.
when we know that somebody's going to talk to us about them again. I mean, it can't possibly work. So it's all about, really continuous conversations. It's having those regular one-to-one conversations with your teams. So that's what Emoti does. It really takes out that whole headache of appraisals. It takes out that 3 hours of having to prepare for your appraisal, the 3 hours the employee has to, or the team member has to, it just takes all of that out. And, it really means that, we all know what gets measured gets done. So if you're measuring how you're achieving your objectives on a regular basis, you're more likely to achieve it. And the feedback that we've had from Emoti is that people find it easier to press an emoji to start a conversation if they're not feeling great than actually sitting in front of their manager and thinking of what the words are to start that conversation around, I'm not feeling it. If they've pressed an emoji, then they feel like that conversation has been started in a much easier way.
If I was thinking about this before today, and so I've done many appraisals from a member of staff point of view. It was something that infuriated me, and I never put how I was feeling on anything. It was all based on everything else. Now, if you have a company system or app or piece of software that it's the company's interested in how you feel because they've got it.
Yeah.
And so, being able to say, oh, I'm not great today, just by doing that is a lot easier and friendlier way of than this appraisal.
Yeah.
Where a manager with a bit of a power complex would use it as a bit of a weapon against you.
Yeah. And to talk to you about something that might have happened 6 months ago or something happened, in a meeting 10 months ago. It's ridiculous, really, isn't it? Yeah. But and often, in appraisals, all that the team member is thinking about is, am I going to get a pay rise? Because it's all about, whether you're going to be and exceeding expectations, all of these, you come out with a number, don't you? You're either a 1, 2, 3, 4 or a 5, and dependent on what that is, then you'll get this pay increase. Yeah. But again, there's that whole piece where, being in corporate for so long, you do these appraisals and you say, right, we've got all of these high performers. So we've got lots of people that are going to get a 5 in their appraisal. And then you talk to the finance director and they say, oh, no. We can't afford to have that many 5s because that means they're going to get a higher pay increase. Right. So the whole bell curve conversation comes out, and therefore you have to degrade people to fit the budget. It's absolute madness. So that's how Emoti was born, really, and it's really doing great, and it's really helping businesses really connect with their teams. Yeah. And I've talked to you about this before, even academy football and those types of things. My son was involved in, that. And, just how are those kids feeling when all they're thinking about is whether they're going to get released or not? Because that is a day, every time they go to training, am I going to get released? Am I going to get released? So how does that impact their, emotions and how they're feeling and their setup? So, it can be used in lots of different ways.
Amazing. So, going back to HR. Yeah. You mentioned that transition from being a staff manager to HR, human resources. I often wondered how that all came about and when did it become more formalised and what was the catalyst for it and things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's always been, right back then it was, as I say, uniforms and locker keys and HR were always seen as, policies and disciplinaries and, all the kind of real negative side of things. And then, I think HR came onto the board. I think, finally, HR, had a seat around the top table, and were able to start, really shaping strategy, the HR strategy, really starting to shape what cultures look like, what people's careers look like, and, all of this, as I've talked about, employee engagement, and, how, HR can really, really drive performance. I think it's taken years for us to get to that place.
Yeah.
But, I'm really excited about it now, and, think that, we've got a great opportunity now to really add value to boards and to teams, and not be seen as just the hirer and the firer.
Yeah. I mentioned before about my first experience with HR was as a recruiter. So I fell into IT recruitment. I remember the head of the whole of the IT recruitment used to say that HR is the biggest con since bottled water. Yeah. And I think his point of view was that they had full control over, and the whole idea of placing people within businesses was a lot quicker, and they got paid quicker, and then HR came in and put barriers and more levels of complexity into it, which were probably needed from the company point of view. Yeah. But it slowed him down. So there's obviously different.
Yeah, and I think what HR needs to do, and I think it's really starting this year, and I've seen a lot of it, is that HR need to be more agile. Right. So, back in the day when I started, and still in lots of businesses, it's still like this, but you'd have, your recruitment team, you'd have your L&D team, you'd have your complement team, you have your engagement team, you have your internal comms team, and then you'd have a whole employment law team. Right. And they all work separately. So they're all in these silos, working independently of each other. And what I think will happen more and more over the next few years is that we'll end up having kind of teams, so project teams, where you'll have somebody from learning and development, you'll have somebody from engagement, somebody from the legal side, somebody from each of those areas of HR that would normally sit in their own silos will be in one team. Yeah. Because and I think, HR need to get that agility, and they need to get that quickly, because employees now, they want an employee experience. They don't want to just come to work, do their job and go home. They're expecting so much more out of businesses now. And, they want the whole employee experience, and they want their employee experience to be targeted at them. They don't want the whole sheep dip. They don't want one size fits all anymore. they don't want that. They want, they don't want one size fits all. They want an employee experience that is targeted and specific to them. So, right from the beginning, all the way through. And, AI can really help us with this as well. So, that's another thing that's coming is AI. It can really help us with the employee experience. It can really help us recruit people in a great way. So what AI can do is it can create recruitment campaigns based on the gens, on if you want to do a recruitment campaign for Gen Z, AI can really help be really creative about what does Gen Z want to know about the business? What's going to make them join your company? We can really do exciting stuff with that. Yeah. And, the other thing that we can really do with AI, and I've seen it, PwC do it, I believe, is that what they're doing is they're taking employee engagement survey data, so how employees have answered their employee engagement surveys, how many job roles that individual might have had, how many times they've been promoted, and they're putting that into AI, and AI will say who's likely to leave. So who are the people that are a flight risk in this business based on that information? So what we can then do is we can have much more positive conversations about retaining those people that we think, oof, these people might be leaving soon, rather than spending time doing exit interviews.
Yeah.
You know, there's a great opportunity there for AI for us in the future.
I think, like you say, when it costs a lot more to recruit someone than it does to retain them.
Yeah.
So possibly it helps give HR the argument at a high, at the board level to say, actually, well, we should invest money in this now because that'll save us money in the future.
Absolutely. It can cost between 30 and 150% of salary to recruit a new person, because you may have to pay them more money than the person that's leaving, and you have to train them. You know, you've spent all of those years potentially training this individual, not only how to kind of behave within your business, or how you want to see and feel and all of that. But that skills gaps can cost you a fortune to replace it. So why not spend the money and the time on retaining the people that you have got?
Yeah. From my experience, personally, I felt HR was kind of on its own, a little island on its own within the business. So they had kind of things they had to tick off.
Totally, yeah.
And, whether it's performance reviews or exit review,
excellent
meetings or whatever. And then nothing was ever fed back to change and improve the reasons why people might have left, or even when it comes to company values, this is something that marketing do as well. Looking at personas and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Collaborate more within the business. Like you say, having project teams where they all work together, and then the whole company can go in one direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it needs to start right from the beginning and go right to the end. So, 22% of new starters leave within the first 45 days.
Wow.
So, we should be spending time really nurturing those people to stay. Because, you do all these interviews and spend all this time recruiting. Engage with those people before they even start with the business. How are you feeling? It's quite daunting starting in a new business, isn't it? So, really engaging with those people before they're even in, is a great thing to do, because, as I say, 22% end up leaving.
There's a lot of people I talk to and they go, I'd like to get into HR.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard. There's lots of qualifications now, and it's very formalised. And I often think there's some characteristics that you need in HR to be successful and to do it for a long time, because it's tough. Yeah. Especially with meetings, and there might be confrontational about performance or having to fire people, or would you have any advice for people that are looking to get into?
I think again, with HR, everybody's got an opinion on HR. So that's hard, because when you join, people have already got these opinions of HR. Lots of people don't trust HR. Yeah. As much as HR is supposed to be the most trustworthy department, it doesn't always play out like that. Right. So I think the most important thing that you can do as a HR person is to really build that trust. And linking with real professionalism and and real support, and just building that trust with your teams. It's the whole know, like and trust, isn't it? Right. The more you get to build those relationships, the more people are going to reach out to you and trust you. And therefore, if you're doing lots of listening as a HR person, you can pivot businesses and change based on feedback. The HR need to be the eyes and ears of the business, and really think, gosh, is that how people are really feeling? And if that is how people are feeling, or if this isn't going well or that's not going well, then it really is, we are
the custodian of the brand, I think. And, so I think that's really, really important. The cons are that, we are kind of like the emotional sponge of the business.
Yeah.
And as a HR person, you do have to make sure that you look out for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Would be my advice for somebody starting out, is that, you can really get quite bogged down because it's not always positive HR. In fact, it's more negative than positive, or it certainly has been, which is why I'm talking about HR can make a real difference. And actually now being on the board and being more agile, and we can make so many strides to being and make such a difference to businesses. Whereas, when we're dealing with disciplinaries, when we're dealing with redundancies, when we're dealing with people on long-term sick, people with, real well-being issues, you are in the firing line of, you're the expert in employment law. So if you get it wrong, there's a lot of pressure on HR people. So, you do have to think about yourself as well, and making sure that you're mentally okay. So because you have to be pretty resilient, because you do take quite a lot of flack.
Resilience
is huge.
Yeah.
Take a lot of flack. I know being on a board, a Gap or wherever I've held senior roles. If you're in logistics, or if you're in one of the areas that people maybe don't know so much about, the logistics director can come in and he can, give this great plan, and I'm going to do this, and this, and everybody go, oh, that sounds great, brilliant. As soon as HR stand up and say, right, I'm going to launch this great new program, all of a sudden everybody becomes the best HR people. And they've got, everybody's got an opinion on HR and, whether that's going to work or whether it's not going to work. And so you do have to be really resilient, and you have to really, be able to put really good arguments across, and, fight for the people, and fight for what you really believe in, and, being human in sometimes a non-human world.
Yeah. And then if you think about really stressful occasions in your life, and it might be having to make someone redundant, or for whatever reason, the stress and emotion that goes into that meeting, especially if you care about people.
It is. And as HR people, if you're going into HR, you are an empathetic person, and you are a people person, otherwise it'd be a crazy place to even start your career, mine finish it. So and I think the way that you deal with those things is with empathy, and you put yourself in those people's shoes, because it could happen I know if people I've been made redundant, so and sometimes that helps because you know how people feel when you're making them redundant. But I think you need to treat people how you want to be treated yourself. It's like my mum used to always say to me, treat people how you want to be treated yourself. And I think if you go into that as a manager, and you go into these things, these redundancies and disciplinaries, and do talk to people like human beings, not with ego, and not like I'm the manager and you're the, employee, and I'm, giving you a disciplinary, and it shouldn't be like that.
No.
Because we should be entering into everything to make people better, not to get rid of people.
Yeah.
We need to see people as a massive value to business, not a cost.
Yeah.
They're the people that, can make your business thrive. And, so therefore treat people and help them thrive with you, I think is one of the most important things for me.
I think it's something private equity could learn a lot about, because it's the main focus is clearly the profitability rating each year.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into that, and quite often, CEOs will come and go, and they'll come in, they'll give have targets to save money,
Yeah.
and they'll get their payoff, but then there's less staff, and then someone else comes in with a similar thing, and then it just doesn't. The people aspect of that, which is really important if you want to grow the business and sell it off.
Of course it is.
Sometimes lost, I think.
Yeah, no, of course it is. And of course you have to keep an eye on your head count. Of course you do. And because you've got to be commercial and you've got to make sure that you make profit. But, you know, I think it's far too often that people are seen as a cost rather than actual human beings.
Yeah. Amazing. So much we could talk about actually with this all, isn't it? So let's go back to Emoti and the app, because I really see the benefits of that in so many different aspects of life.
Yeah.
When it's been used currently and in the past, what's the feedback that you've had back from the staff and the effect it's had on?
Yeah. So one really great case study is we have it in a private school called Abbeygate College, and luckily they had Emoti through lockdown.
Wow.
So obviously we didn't know lockdown was coming, but they'd already got Emoti up and running, which was great for us to kind of trial it in a school's environment, really, because very traditional business, certainly private schools, very traditional in their ways. But luckily there was a really forward-thinking it wasn't a headmaster, it was headmistress there, and she wanted to really kind of push the boundaries of what they could do. So we put Emoti in there, and then lockdown happened.
Sure.
And what they said was, because obviously the teachers, they had to start doing online tutoring. They'd probably never used Teams, or a lot of us hadn't used Zoom or Teams or any of that. And then all of a sudden, they're teaching 30 children on a screen. It's terrifying if you look back on it. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Completely different way of doing things. So it's surreal. It's a stress involved with doing something different, and then
and controlling 30 kids that are at home and not having their cameras on, or having the cameras on, or playing playing a game while they're online. But so I digress. But the feedback that we had from them was that Emoti was an absolute godsend, and that was their words, not mine. And they said that the people or the teachers that they thought would be okay weren't.
Okay.
And the ones that they didn't think would be okay were fine.
Okay.
So therefore, by having Emoti, they were focusing on the people that were struggling, that they wouldn't have focused on should Emoti not been involved.
Yeah.
So that, just from the emotion part of Emoti, was fantastic feedback, and they still use it now, 5 years later.
And inspired conversations, I'm sure.
Really, with the headmistress, because obviously not in the school, they're all working from home. So how do they connect? Certainly, when we went first into lockdown, how do they connect with those teachers? So that was great. And then we have it in another business called Ultimate, a creative agency in Manchester. And they use it, and they've used it for 4 years, and it's really just the lifeblood of their business. They, employees check in bi-weekly, and the CEO says, the fact that he knows when people are not feeling great is so amazing for him, that they can just ring them and say, look, you've checked in with a red Emoti, how are you? How's things? Because if you press one of the lower emojis, an email goes directly to the manager to say, James has checked in and isn't feeling great. So it gives the manager a great opportunity to check in with that employee and check that they're okay. So they use it for that, but they have also embraced it for their review process. And it's just taken out hours upon hours of that. Deloitte took out appraisals, and they've saved 2 million hours
Wow.
2 million hours. So you imagine that you've got those 2 million hours, what people can do with those 2 million hours that they're now not spending doing appraisals.
Yeah.
I mean, productivity at Deloitte just went through the roof. So, yeah, so we've got companies using it and just taking out the headache of appraisals.
So it's managers' times, because if they know something's not right and they can deal with it straight away,
yeah.
then they don't have to wait for something bad to happen or for them to go off sick or...
So you're
or
nipping
whatever.
stuff in the bud. And the other thing that they've done is there's a feedback module on Emoti. So what we're finding is that teams are starting to give each other kudos on, you know, I thought you did that great this week and I thought you did a brilliant job on that. And so it's really building, you know, the team culture. And now they use the platform to decide on the employee of the month. So it all depends on who's got more feedback. And, you know, so it's really, I think, you know, if you really just take on Emoti and really, you know, go for it and put it into your business, then you'll reap the rewards at the end.
Does it link in with performance as well? So emotion and performance?
Yeah,
because they can often be linked, can't they?
No. So that's obviously with the appraisal. It's very much a performance based. You know, it's not a fluffy HR kind of app. It's definitely not that.
No.
It's very much a commercial app. It's about helping drive real performance in business.
Sure.
So, you know, if you're checking in with your people on a regular basis and you're having these conscious conversations, then, you know, their performance should be better and your business should be better for it. Yeah.
Amazing. So, when you think about how the industry has changed from when you first started to now, and do you see any challenges for the industry moving forward? You know, it seems like it's moved on a lot from what it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really positive about HR moving forward. I really am. If you'd have asked me a few years ago, you know, it's quite hard work sometimes, but I've got real high hopes for HR. I think some of the, you know, things that I've talked about around AI, around HR really being more agile, really supporting cultures, really getting involved in the employee experience and, you know, just driving engagement to drive profitability within business. I just think the future's really bright for HR at the moment.
Yeah.
I think we've got a great opportunity to make a massive difference to people and to business.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's definitely opened my eyes a little bit. I was quite negative towards HR.
Yeah.
You know, obviously taking on staff now, you start to appreciate the different aspects of it that are you know, was clearly important.
Yeah, and I think again, you know, I said don't see your people as a cost. Don't see HR as a cost always. You know, it's the value that HR can bring now. I think is massive. And you know, I can, you know, with my HR consultancy, I can help small to medium-sized businesses, and they don't need their full-time HR person. They can just dip in and out of my kind of support, which is great for them you know, to be able to use kind of the strategic level or the more generalist level support as well.
Yeah, amazing. We'll definitely put all the links to business on description of the episode,
great.
and definitely Emoti. I know there's a really interesting video on YouTube.
Yes, there's a YouTube video on there just explaining
what it looks like, and I can really see the benefits for that. And,
great.
Appreciate your time.
Thank
today.
you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Done.